So we'll see if they do good. If they don't, well, we'll have fun talking. All right, go ahead.
Yep, I started. Hi to everyone that's joining. We're waiting for a couple more panelists, and in the meantime, we'll go live on Facebook.
Last time the Facebook didn't go on my page for some reason. So
really, okay, I'll try again.
All right. And I'll log in also so I can share it.
So you're enjoying it, yes?
I like South Carolina. Yeah, it's not a bad.
My brother was out there. My brother finished medical school there.
In which city?
He was in Charlottesville.
Okay.
So he was out there.
I don't know where that is. I'm in Greenville.
Oh, really? So he was out there. They were out there for a while. I mean, him and his wife.
Oh, so, Nizar is here. Kim, he's on the attendees list for some reason.
Okay, so he probably joined with a different email. Let me just move him.
Awesome.
There we go.
Have your
Hi again to everyone. Yeah, my family's here. Welcome. Just going live on Facebook.
Here. I see Lamar is on. I assume that maybe not.
Yeah, no, it is probably. Let's bring him on.
All right. Hi, Nizar.
Hi.
Good to see you, sir.
Likewise.
Do you guys know each other, Nizar and Kefah?
No, I do not. Hi Kefah.
Hi Nizar, how are you?
Should.
من بيت مين بلا صغرى؟
أنا من دار أبوخدير.
والنعم أهلين.
مرحبا.
والنعم أهلين.
Husam is joining us from Bethlehem. So we have somebody from Jerusalem, somebody from the US, somebody from Bethlehem. We're getting a nice. We could have tried with somebody from Gaza, but I don't think electricity is reliable enough. Okay, are we live already, Kim? Or
one more second.
We're just waiting. Here we go. We are live on Facebook, and hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Crossing Boundaries. And I'm here with Kim Youssef, and we have 3 guests with us today: Kefah AbuKhdeir, Nizar Farsakh, and Husam Jubran. Husam looks so comfortable. You're like about to take a nap, man. You're like, this is. We're gonna talk about Palestinian elections. I'm gonna prepare my argile and do some coffee and have this discussion while I'm very relaxed. Because what could be more relaxing than talking about Palestinian elections?
Yeah.
And that's what we are talking about today. We will be talking about Palestinian elections. It's interesting because there's Palestinian elections, there's Israeli elections. Israelis have made it a habit where every 6 months to a year, apparently, they decided to do an election, which is ridiculous because you end up with the same results. I don't get why you keep doing those elections. It's a waste of money and time.
Extra money.
Yeah, it's absurd, right, Kim? I know we'll talk about it next week, probably.
Right, we'll talk about it more next week. But like I was telling you earlier, I think that Netanyahu feels like he needs a tap on the back every year just to make sure that he's in the right spot.
He's like, see, I can win. He needs to be firm. I can win again. I can still trick even smart people to vote for me. And
maybe it's a TikTok challenge. It might be a TikTok challenge, and then he goes for it every year. I don't know.
But isn't it also that his coalition is threatened, so that's why?
Oh, but you're going for like real analysis and
the truth, yeah.
Yeah, because so long as he's prime minister, he's off the hook on his indictment, right?
That's another issue, yeah.
And so next week you should listen. We're gonna bring some people to talk about the Israeli elections, but this week we thought, let's talk about the big news, which is Palestinian elections. Because last time we had one, I was such a young kid. It was so long time ago that it's crazy to think I mean, honestly, part of me think it's not going to happen because how many times it's been announced and then oops, it didn't happen. So maybe we can start. Nizar, I'll start with you. Well, let me first introduce you guys. Nizar Farsakh, we said you are in Washington and you do a lot of different things, but you've worked with the PLO before. You worked at you were the Director General of the U.S. Of the Palestinian Embassy in the U.S. and you are teaching now at George Washington University. And Kefah AbuKhdeir, who moved back to Palestine from the U.S. From Atlanta and lives in Shafat in Jerusalem and works mainly, I believe, now in education, right? Right, Kefah?
Yes. Right now, I helped to found one of the first educational. Well, now we're ed tech. Before we're doing just college prep and learning, and then COVID hit, and so now we're one of the first educational startups and it's also headed by women. So me and teachers from Gaza basically got together and are now starting up one of our first educational technology companies.
That's awesome. And then we have Husam Jubran with us from Beit Sahur, a suburb of Bethlehem. And I think quite a few of the people here probably know him. He's a tour guide with us, but also has a degree, a master's degree in conflict resolution and from Eastern Mennonite University and very involved in all these topics. And we thought it would be great to have his thoughts on this topic. So Nizar, I was talking to a friend of mine who's kind of very well connected to the Palestinian Authority. And I was asking him, why have an election now? I mean, for 15, 16 years, we haven't had an election. Why it seems to be more serious at this time? And his, I wonder what your thought is, but his thoughts had to do with the United States. And he said the moment Biden won, it was a clear. There were signals coming from the Biden administration before even they were sworn in that we're not gonna work with a government that's not legitimate. You need to do election, which kind of reminds me actually of the last election we had, which was President Bush back then pushed the Palestinian Authority to do it. It didn't end up great. So what's your read on that being in Washington? Is this the reason, or you see other reasons of why the Palestinian Authority decided to do this election? Or wants to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have insider information, but from my knowledge of the PA and the people I worked with, whether it is Mahmoud Abbas, President Abbas, or even Hamas interlocutors, the challenge has always been that both Fatah and Hamas are happy where they are, right? Of course, there was the fight in 2007, and basically Fatah and Hamas coexisted. They still hate each other, but Fatah purged basically Hamas from the West Bank. They made sure that they don't have a political standing to challenge them in the West Bank. And likewise, Hamas purged Fatah and downsized them so that they are not a real threat to their authority in Gaza. And that arrangement has been working. So forget the rhetoric, right? So actions speak louder than words, right? Both Hamas and Fatah have said, yeah, we won elections 2014, 2015, 2017, 2018, each time, right? They say, oh, we're going to do elections, right? I got sick and tired of hearing people telling me that they want elections, right? Yeah. And what happens is sometimes one party or the other does feel like it wants election because it, under its assumptions, it's assessing that if there are elections now, it would win, right? So Hamas would push or Fatah would push depending on which of them thinks that they stand a better chance. And sometimes they just said it just to get people off their back and what have you, because the popular sentiment in the street, the majority of Palestinians are feeling the pain of this separation and want elections, both for representation, because both Fatah and Hamas are performing very badly, both in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip as far as services, but also because they realize that without Palestinian unity, there's definitely no progress on the peace process, right? So now it does seem, and of course, when either party doesn't want the election to happen, they would say, oh, we can't because Israel is not going to allow it. And that is a real challenge. We definitely cannot have elections or elections that are legitimate enough if the Israelis don't cooperate, because then what will happen with the Jerusalemites? Israel controls the checkpoints. How do you make sure that the ballots are passing through the checkpoints, and so on and so forth? So Israeli buy-in is necessary for the elections to be seen as legitimate in the eyes of the electorate. Having said that, I could see a scenario where either party or both are not necessarily interested in elections that are seen as legitimate. They just want to tick the box that we got elected, and Hamas continues to control Gaza and Fatah continues to control the West Bank. Now, to come to the point of the US, I think that is correct. I think in the Fatah calculation, with Biden in power, the same calculus of the Palestinian electorate of 2006, when they voted Abu Mazen, not because they liked him, but because back in 2006, I don't know, I don't know if you remember, Aziz, but there was a sentiment that Arafat was a problem, that the guy is just too old. We love him, but we are not getting progress. Of course, the US and Israel suck, but also Arafat is not really helping the process.
Now let's get the young guy, Abu Mazen, back then.
Not young guy, but the guy who has a history and a reputation and a brand of being a peacenik. Back since the 74, he was for the two-state solution. So you can criticize Abu Mazen as much as you want, but he is consistent, right? Like he's kind of like Sanders in that he's always was against, was for a diplomatic solution and was for the two-state solution. So he was consistent, and he had good relations with the Israelis and with the Americans. So the Palestinian calculus in 2006 was, if anybody's gonna get any results from the Americans and the Israelis, it's Abu Mazen, right? So he got like 65% of the vote, not because people like him. In fact, Abu Mazen never had a constituency, not even in Fatah, right? He was, for his competitors in Fatah, he was less threatening, right? Again, because he does not have a constituency. He developed one as a president, but before he was president, he did not actually have a constituency. And the Palestinian electorate elected him because they were betting on, they wanted change, and they thought that Abu Mazen had already the relationships and the connections with the Israelis and Americans that may get results. And in fact, when the Gaza evacuation happened, all the polls showed, especially the first 2 weeks, when people actually could cross Rafah within 15 minutes as opposed to 3 days, there was a surge of support for diplomacy and a plummet in support for military means for liberation in Palestine, right? And that gave Abu Mazen a big boost. But afterwards, when they closed Carney and all sorts of problems happened, a year into that, right, people said, you know what, if even Abu Mazen cannot deliver, so let's vote Hamas. Sorry, so I meant elections in 2005, and then the second election in 2006 got Hamas. I had Christian friends who voted Hamas just because they said, okay, clearly Abu Mazen didn't work. If even Abu Mazen couldn't get results with these guys, maybe we need Hamas, because we saw what Hezbollah did and how Hezbollah got results. So maybe Israel does need somebody like Hamas. So that's how Hamas won. And now the calculus, I think, for Fatah is, for the Palestinian electorate, they're going to see, oh, okay, now with Biden in power, we definitely want somebody like Abu Mazen. He's going to get results with Biden, unlike Hamas. And I think for Hamas, with Biden again in office, that is not really interested in conflict resolution. They've said it. They do not want. They do not have an envoy for the peace envoy for the Palestinians. That I think also works for them because, and Biden already said he's going to send the aid, the UNRWA aid. So that works for both parties. So definitely it is that change in the policy. Sorry, I was verbose, but I thought it was necessary to bring all the context of why
100%.
both Hamas and Fatah because they think the Palestinian electorate are gonna, so they're gonna check the box for sure that, okay, we got the elections, let's get over it. But also there is very little for either Fatah or Hamas to lose even if they don't get all the seats, because okay, how is the parliament going to function? Like both Fatah and Hamas understand that body politic is very limited.
Yeah, thanks, Nizar. I think that was important background to give for our listeners as well. Kefah, let's move to you. I wanted to ask, one of the things that Nizar mentioned was about Jerusalem. And I'm not sure that's something that actually changed. I know that used to be a reason why not to have an election, because of Jerusalem or because of Israel accepting it to happen. Where are we at right now?
Where are we at right now? Well, again, just like everything else here, you do have to add context. I don't know if Nizar and anybody else remembers, back in 2005, 2006, we actually voted from here. We voted from Jerusalem. And I think that, and in subsequent, I think we've had like 2 or 3 elections. I mean, it's been so long, I forgot. So the thing is that with by taking out the Jerusalem electorate or the Jerusalem body from voting, I think you got different dynamics going, and you had a different way of thinking. Jerusalemites vote a little bit differently. They're going to have their input's going to be different. And sometimes I feel like maybe we were left out because of that. And we got that extreme polarization in the other elections. When it comes to electing, I'm going to look at it from a teacher and education point of view. We have no idea. Even if there were going to be elections, we have no idea how this process is going to happen. We're not taught, it is not given in schools. Civic education does not exist for Palestinian children. Anything like in the form of PSA messaging also does not exist. I mean, let's say you do simple Google search in Arabic or English. And I actually, after Aziz talked to me and told me about this, I started, like, you can't find anything. Like, we don't know where our governance are. We don't know who's running. What do they represent? And Nizar brought up, okay, Fatah Hamas, what does that mean? I mean, what are they bringing to the table? When they're representing me, what does that mean? Just fight Israel? Okay, where does that go? And fighting Israel, what does that mean? So again, I mean, and as for me, if we're living in Jerusalem, some of us have Israeli citizenship, some of us have Israeli residency. It does not give a resident any stability, and it does not represent somebody with Israeli citizenship. So like, let's say somebody like me, I have Israeli citizenship. One of the reasons that I do have it, this is why I'm here, because it's a loophole. It's how I got to stay. It's samut. Use the system so that you can stay here. So that when I come back, I don't use the laissez-passer, and they don't have any right to send me out. My kids have stayed here, so we increased the Palestinian population. 10 of us got to stay here. I'm not represented, and I have no way to say, and I'm still part of that community. I'm still a Palestinian because I'm definitely not represented in Israel. The Knesset does not represent me, even though they're all Palestinian members, but they're constantly shut down. And the only place I could turn to is the Palestinian election thing, but I have no idea how to work or how to participate in that.
Thank you, Kefah. Husam, how are people in the West Bank welcoming the news about the elections? Are people excited? People are like, kind of like Kefah, yeah, what the heck is this? What is Hamas and Fatah gonna do for us? Do you see people mobilizing to run for this election or to support either parties or new parties?
Simple answer, people don't care. I don't see any kind of excitement here, or even talk. Forget the excitement. Put it aside. I don't hear people around me that they really engaged talking about the election. And I think that fit what Nizar explained. I agree with his analysis about the situation. And probably because of that and the issue of Jerusalem, people are not still have any kind of interest in the upcoming election, because Jerusalem is crucial. the participation of Jerusalemites or lack of their participation will determine which direction people may make their opinion about. I think there is a catch here, because if Israel is saying, yes, we will allow Jerusalemites to vote and practice their right, probably people will say, there is something cooked somewhere in the world. So it seems there is some kind of, either it go toward conspiracy, there is some kind of conspiracy, or, wow, probably there is hope, and probably there is a change that may take place. And it depends which direction they're gonna go will determine how excited they will be. But as far as I see, I think Fatah and Hamas, they need to renew their legitimacy, because it's been 14 years since the last election. So there is nothing from legal perspective you can argue that it's legit. And there is a need to do that. But even if everything works, still there is a lot of obstacles along the way, in regard to internal problems inside Fatah, internal problems in Hamas, and also the participation of the local people, the Palestinians who are here around. But basically, so far, I could easily say, at least from the people around me, there is almost no interest.
Thank you. And we're getting some amazing questions. I think we're getting more questions than we usually get. So maybe we should move toward the questions we're getting, Kim, faster than we usually do. What do you think?
Sure, definitely.
Do you want to pick one, or do you want me to pick one?
Go ahead. I'll do the next.
Well, here's one, and we can move forward back and forth between you guys and who wants to answer those if it's not aimed toward specific person. Are there any smaller parties that can have an effect of pushing Fatah and or Hamas to change their policies, improve services? Traditionally, we had the left, Jabha, these kind of groups, although they've become quite weaker. Is there anybody else that we can go to? And maybe I can add to it, are there new faces? What about the younger generation? I mean, 70% of Palestinians are under 35. We now, I think most of us in this are now considered the old generation, actually. Are they gonna be in this election? Who would like to tackle that?
I don't know. Again, Husam, Nazar, do y'all see anybody? I don't.
No.
You're in Betha, I'm in Jerusalem. I don't see anybody coming up. It's always the same old guys. It's always that group of men. It's like, I call it the kahwa. I call it the cafe. There's the same old group of men that are sitting together just making decisions. I mean, it's gotten extremely patriarchal. It has nothing to do with representation. There's a lot of great people out there, and maybe they might have their NGOs, but no, I don't see anybody new coming up.
I agree. I don't see the left there is no left anymore. I don't think even it's proper to say that there is left and they are influential or they could make anything. But probably that's the good thing about the election. Probably it will bring in new faces. That's why, like for me personally, I have some kind of anticipation, because you never know. People will start to emerge, and that's the whole concept, the idea of democracy and having election. And I just hope that someone will emerge, even if he or she will not make it, but still, that could be a step forward.
You know, I do have a question. We do have a Dahlan influence here, and he's buying real estate like crazy. Yeah. And that seems like, instead of like, because I know in the camps in Lebanon, he was giving away money.
Can you say just in a couple words who is Dahlan? Because I don't think everyone on this call know who Dahlan is. And Dahlan to be a general military and a Palestinian person who, him and Abbas split up significantly, and he's in exile, I guess you could say, but has a huge. He's Abbas' main challenger, but he can't really run for the elections because he's Abbas' main challenger. But he has a lot of people in Fatah who support him.
Oh yeah, I've seen the influence grow here. I don't know how it is in the West Bank. I do know he's sending out a lot of people, representatives, and they're giving away money like crazy.
Yeah,
They're
he's a lot
also
of money, not a lot of support. I think he lost support
Mhm.
through years. I think the wild card is Barghouthi and his decision if he's going to run for election from the prison or he will stay aside. If Barghouthi decides to run, that will change things, a lot of things.
Again, Husam, who's Barghouthi?
Barghouthi is one of the most prominent leaders in the Fatah movement. He was arrested in 2002 when Israel took over West Bank, and he's sentenced for lifetime in prison. They accused him of being involved in planning attacks inside Israel. But he, even at that time, he was like one of the top leaders in Fatah movement. And he had a lot of credibility amongst people, and like he's the one who will he's like a magnet. He will bring everybody around him, so he will get a lot of support even from independent people who even don't care about politics.
But is he gonna run?
There is a talk that he may run, and there is a talk that he's under pressure from Abbas people, because they worried that he will run for presidency. So that's why we're waiting what will be the outcome of that
potential
dynamic.
wild card in this election.
Yeah, if I may add a few things here. It's Marwan Barghouti. Somebody was asking. I'm writing it now. So Marwan is part of that younger generation of the first intifada of Fatah, right? So there's a whole segment of Palestinians in Fatah who have tensions with the old guard who came from Tunis, right? It's pathetic that when Fatah had its own internal elections after like 20 years or maybe even 30 years of not having internal elections, the average age of their central committee went from 80 to 60, right? So even the Dahlan and the Marwan Barghouti didn't even get to that. So there is a tension inside Fatah of the old guard versus the new guard. And Abu Mazen definitely, like in every poll, Marwan Barghouti always wins over Abu Mazen. Abu Mazen knows that and is scared of that. So the only reason he would be fine with that if he gets guarantees from Israel that Marwan doesn't get out. Having said that, and I agree with you guys, Dahlan is spending money. So of course, they won't let him back in. But he will be able to disrupt the Fatah candidates in different districts, especially in Gaza, right? So that's going to complicate things for Abu Mazen and his and that establishment that is with him. Hanan Ashrawi quit the executive committee, right? That's a very bad sign. But that also has to do with the PFLP and the left. Historically, their power was not in the parliament, their power was from the seats they hold in the PLO executive committee. And they've always, that's the only place where they've been able to exercise some influence and not even power. And I don't see them doing much better. They've been quite sidelined, and with the rift between Hamas and Fatah, they've sided with a bit against Hamas because they're more secular and they're worried of the Islamic platform. And the third thing is Fayyad. Fayyad is also out of the picture, the third party. Like he's persona non grata until today. He's in Princeton. I'm in touch with him, and he's very frustrated that he's not allowed back in, even if he's technically allowed back in, but they're gonna give him hell. So that's not. Having said all of that, what I see a silver lining is the new generation. There are a lot of people, I don't know if you are familiar with organizations like Zimam and like the teachers movement and the social security movement. All of these new faces and the nonviolent movement, right? All of those stand to actually take advantage, and we need to encourage them to run. Because and they need to run as independents, because regardless of what we think of the elections, that it's not going to be influential, and Abu Mazen is going to continue to concentrate power in his hands. I do think that we shouldn't approach it as the perfect being the enemy of the good. There's a lot of good that can happen from young people or new people who are decent, who have a track record of working in their communities, to get involved in politics, so that at the very least they challenge Fatah and Hamas's, complete control of Palestinian politics, right? At the service level, just at the service level, to hold them accountable and to be able to do those small projects, small things on education, small things on health, small things on water use and environment and agriculture and sustainability. The same way that in the first Intifada, the Palestinians under occupation managed their services way better than the PA is doing now. You had, education, you had food committees, right? Agriculture committees. So I think that's where the opportunity lies. We need to encourage young people like those. There were great mayors, female, women mayors in small towns like Tulkarm and other places, and Ramallah, who did very good changes in their localities because they got elected in the local elections. So similar types of people, because the example of having agency, and yes, the occupation is very bad. Yes, Fatah and Hamas are very bad, but that doesn't mean that there isn't other stuff that we could be doing to take reins of our politics. So I do encourage that we take advantage of that.
I would really like to see some new faces come up, and I would really like to see some post-Oslo faces, because I think Oslo made us welfare dependent. Because, now if you want, I don't know if y'all remember Intifada 1, you never heard the word tamweed, funding. Now you want to do anything. Everybody, the first question they ask them, where's the funding from? So and a lot of this new generation, they're really fed up with tamweed. And they're fed up with the conditions, and they've been through it. And I'm hoping more will come out, because I really feel like Oslo killed what we were famous for, and that is that we've always been able to, like you said, we've always been able to take care of ourselves no matter what occupation is here, and we've always managed to find a way. So yeah, part of the reason that I hope to connect with people here that are thinking differently, because for us in Jerusalem, we're starting to lose more of our identity. There's a lot of people who want, let's say, Israeli, again, I'm speaking as a teacher, who want Israeli curriculums. We really don't have education is just, if you want to call it a Palestinian education, it hasn't changed like in 20 years. I also believe in, I will say this, and I do advocate for this in real life. I want us as Palestinians to be in Israeli universities, and I want us to be challenging and competing with Israel. I don't want to keep fighting. I want to challenge, compete, and stand toe to toe and show everybody what we are and what we've always been. So yeah, so if y'all are out there, talk to us, because Hamas and Fatah, they're just not cutting it.
This is all awesome. Thank you so much. Kim, what do you think? What's next?
Well, I think Nizar and Kefah talked a bit about what they are looking for in the next leader. Maybe Husam can also add about what he thinks. You all said that there is no one to look up to right now, but who would you imagine? Who would you want?
Personally, I don't care like who would be the next leader, as long there is election and the people is selecting whoever will be the leader. Like as long we guarantee that there will be process to select someone, that for me is more important. And
but I'll push you on that. What's important for you to see in the future? No change?
No, this is it. And I think this is the direction where the people will start utilizing and thinking about in the future is for this election. Do we want to keep the status quo, or we want to select people who are willing to try a different way? The problem, there is no clear idea what's the different way. There is a lot of fragmentation amongst people who are against the status quo, but they're not sure where to go in the sense of the peace process, no peace process, 2 states, 1 state, half a state, 6 states, whatever states. But I think the course for the next few months, it will be with the status quo against the status quo. I think what Fatah and Hamas trying to do now to keep the status quo, they have interest in keeping the status quo. And I hope that whoever will emerge, it will lead to changing that status quo.
Let's though bring the elephant in the room a little bit, which is even if Abbas, which I do not see that happen, but let's assume a miracle comes from heaven and whenever this election happen and Abbas loses the election and Marwan wins or somebody else if they run against him. You know, this is only the election for the PA, not for the PLO. Meaning Abbas would remain ahead of whoever becomes the president of the PA. All the negotiations is supposedly controlled by the PLO. All our embassies controlled by the PLO. All our money controlled by the PLO. So even like there's a little bit of a sham with this election of saying, oh, we can change our leaders. But in reality, the only way to change our leaders is through the PLO. And there is no way for us to vote for the PLO. I have no voice in the PLO, neither does any of you. It's all these few people who are, as Nizar, you mentioned earlier, all of them are like ancient. They all pre-Oslo, many years pre-Oslo faces. So even if we do get some change today and there is an election and it's amazing, it's not really as potentially as change making as we could hope it would be, because Abbas kind of guaranteeing that even if I lose, I'm not losing. And somebody here had a question. He doesn't even have somebody even within the PLO who would take power if something happens to him. What would happen then? Like, who is our next leaders if something happens to Abbas, PLO speaking, not just PL? What would happen then? A civil war, a fight among the old guard?
He has a deputy. I can't remember his name. He chose somebody that he knows is not a threat to him. But technically speaking, he would take over from him as his deputy. But you're right. I mean, I would just caution you from saying, declarative statements. Like also Trump was not expected. Also Obama was not expected. There are other things that are impossible that also happen, right? It was not. We couldn't even imagine Ariel Sharon, who was the spearhead of the colonial movement in Israel, to be the one who dismantled settlements in Gaza. Like just a few weeks before announcing the disengagement, he had said something like, "Kfar Darom is just as important as Rishon LeZion," right? So a lot of surprising things do happen. Abu Mazen is not omnipotent, and while of course we have very high aspirations, we shouldn't, again, I would caution us from being cynical and expect, anything short of complete liberation is not worth the fight. I think it's all of those small fights that we need to take. I do think it's an opportunity. Abu Mazen is going to not be around. He's going to not allow whatever he has power to do. But I think the essential thing is what Husam said, which is really it would be great if somebody has a platform, but we need people with integrity, people who are active, who can challenge the status quo and not just, toe the line of Fatah and toe the line of Hamas. And there are plenty of those. So it's an opportunity for those to come into power. And like the majority of Palestinians believe in nonviolent resistance, right? But the PA pays lip service to it, right? But doesn't actually support it, right? And in fact, tries to undermine it. Like I was in Birzeit last summer. Yeah, last summer. And there was it, I think last summer or maybe the summer before that. And our house happens to be just in front of the Birzeit University. And there were, Palestinians throwing rocks at Israeli jeeps. And like, there were plenty of PA Secret Service. Like you could tell. Because of course, they want to know who are the movers and shakers, who are those Palestinians who are active, because they want to pay attention to them, right? So, I mean, of course, they're in power and they want to keep their power, but that doesn't mean their power is omnipotent. So I do think that there is, the PLO has functions, and whoever gets elected does have the capacity to try to move things. So whether it's Ahmed Shtayeh or there was talk about, many analysts said that post Abu Mazen, Allah yطول بعمره, of course, nobody's wishing him death. there is going to be some sort of troika where there isn't one person who's in charge. There's one that's going to be for the PLO chairman, one for the PA prime minister, and one for Fatah. And there will be some sort of troika of maybe Shtayy and Rub or Faraj. So dividing those powers or authorities in ways that work. So the head of the PA would be somebody that Israel can coordinate security with. The head of the PLO would somebody with good foreign relations. And the prime minister would be somebody who's good with the donor community, right? So that is possible too. And again, for example, I'm very pleasantly surprised at how, regardless of what you think of Mohammed Shtayy, his performance at the beginning with the COVID crisis was pretty, he was effective administrator in that sense. So there are a lot of things that can work, and we shouldn't like throw the baby with the water.
But isn't it like the fact that we have to speculate about everything, doesn't that unnerve anyone? There is nothing out there that I can refer to. As a Palestinian, I find that a little bit embarrassing because in the past, we coined a new term. Intifada comes from us. Intifada didn't exist in the Arabic language. And we were able to organize, we were able to challenge without violence. So all of this, when I'm listening to you and me, and trying to get everything in Arabic and English, and we have 5 languages going on here, and I'm reading everything, and everything's based on, we're all doing the same thing, we're all speculating. And that frustrates the heck out of me.
But that's by design, right? Like neither Hamas nor Fatah are interested in, like, even Hamas is trying to co-opt the nonviolent movement in Gaza, right? So, that's natural. But speaking to what you said, I shared in the chat, everybody needs to watch Naila and the Uprising, like just to remind all of us how the first Intifada was about, and how we had female leaders that were amazing. And it wasn't rocket science, but we completely did it ourselves, right? So we can do that again completely. We just need to remember that we have the capacity to do that. In fact, to your point, Kefah, when I was training Egyptians on leadership, they themselves mentioned that their inspiration for their uprising was the Palestinians. They said, look, the Palestinians in 1987 against those formidable Israelis were able to, challenge the Israeli military army. We can't challenge our own.
The thing that I always say is that Intifada 1, maybe Intifada 2 more, is that we brought the struggle into Palestine.
That's
when they had exiled us, and remember, everybody was trying to fight from the outside. We brought it back in. Now, having said that, the speculation bothers me. I also worry about people in Gaza, and the more that I establish a communication with them, I start to realize how many civil liberties they don't have. The West Bank, Ahwan, but Gaza is from all sides. It really is. They are, and I am going to say this. They claim to be an Islamic government, and an Islamic government is supposed to protect rights. Under an Islamic government, you have inherent rights that are given to you by God. They are not protecting those inherent rights that these people have. And it's not fair. And it frustrates me as a Palestinian that I can't do anything as a Palestinian to go help them. I don't want anybody else getting involved. I want us to get involved and build something. So here we are. So all this is.
And this is, I'll tell you, somebody here asked me if I want to throw my hat in the ring, and I like my hat, I'm not throwing it anywhere. And I was thinking, well, with COVID, I can't, I'm right now in the US, I would have, in normal circumstances, considered it, flew back, set up my base again in Jerusalem, and really would have considered doing that. And then I thought, why? Half of Palestinians don't live, more than half of Palestinians don't live there. And we are voting for the people, not only who represent Palestinians in Palestine. In reality, we need, again, maybe it is rethinking how the PLO works, but people like you, Nizar, people like me, who maybe not spending all of our times there, I usually go back and forth half of my time, we would like to be more involved, and we can't. And we have incredible talents overseas, incredible Palestinian talent that would be so much better than the current leadership. At least some of them would like to be involved. And unfortunately, there is no avenue for that kind of talent to be involved. And that's a bit of a disappointment, I think, that we can't cultivate the brain, wealth that we have. I talk to some people here in Washington or people in New York, and similar people, Kefah and Nizar and Husam, you all stayed in the U.S. at some point, and we can't have access to this in local politics. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's well, one thing I would say. Again, I would caution at looking at Palestine as different from any other place in the world. In politics, 99% of politicians are always going to prefer loyalty over competence, right? Because people in power would rather stay in power, even the good ones, right? Because they're thinking, I have a platform, I want to do all of these good things. I cannot do them if I'm not in power, right? So even Obama compromised on all sorts of things in order to get the 4 other term or 4 other years in order to get stuff done. So he didn't choose the more competent people. He chose the people around him that would guarantee him another 4 years. And there is a lot of frustration in what he did, but that's the nature of politics. What is possible, and that I need to stay in power to be able to do the platform. So when it comes to Palestine and competence, not to be too much of a conspiracy theorist, but the whole premise of Oslo, the only reason Rabin, the peacenik, right, allowed Arafat in was precisely Kifah's point. Their problem was the Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip who stopped waiting for Salah ad-Din coming from outside, whether it's Abdel Nasser or Arafat, who's coming from Lebanon. Once the PLO got kicked out and went to Tunisia, the Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip realized that they are left to their own devices. And that's what scared the living daylight out of the Israeli establishment, because they realized we are facing a group of people that have literally nothing to lose, right? And that's why the wager to bring the Tunisians, the PLO from, they knew the PLO was corrupt and they wanted it corrupt, right? Because they needed the Palestinians to get busy with each other and give them just enough. Again, this is not a conspiracy theory. You read their memoirs, you see that, right? It's just smart politics. You need them to have just enough to worry about losing it. And that exactly explains 2007. Like Hamas and Fatah killed each other literally, right? Just for that little amount of power that they had in Ramallah and in Gaza, right? That was enough for them. But in the first Intifada, nobody had anything, right? So literally nobody had anything to lose. That's why you had so much solidarity. Back in 87, you couldn't dream of Fatah or somebody from Fatah or Hamas to even think of doing something without coordinating with the other factions.
But we didn't even have Hamas. Remember that? It was all separate.
No, but the Islamic movement, because philosophically they disagreed with the platform, but none of the factions even envisaged that they could get anything done. And that's not
including Fatah. I mean, I remember I was a kid, but I remember a little bit of how it was hijacked eventually by those political parties, and that people were not really doing it for loyalty to Fatah or for loyalty to Hamas or to any of these groups.
Well,
because they didn't have those clientele relationships, which Oslo brought in.
Right.
So, and that's to your point, Kefah, that's the difference with the second Intifada. In the first Intifada, it was completely popular. In the second Intifada, it was taken over by the political parties, right? Even the PFLP and the DFLP, right? The suicide bombings, because that was, and in that point, I agree with Abu Mazen. The militarization of the second Intifada lent itself for the factions to get in, because they were the ones with the weapons, right? And that's the power of nonviolence. With nonviolence, you involve the whole population. When it's violent, only the people that can carry arms and are trained can, right? So that's where I think we have. Now I remember.
Well, you know, there are also resistance government. I mean, where has, I mean, seriously, I'm looking for an example. Where has a resistance government like the PLO translated well into real
IRA,
life?
the Republican Army.
Okay, well,
But
we need to talk to
they
them.
had extreme discipline, and like you don't want to know the kinds of things they did to make sure that their internal discipline, like they would kill people to make sure that people toe the line. So I mean, there's plus and minus there. But now I remember the thing about Marwan. On Husam's point, Marwan Barghouti's popularity, first because he was in the first Intifada, so he actually like. While I disagree, I think there are a lot of problems with Marwan, but like he's just an affable person. Like when I saw him in the street, I just fell in love with him. Right, so he has that. But he was really genuine in the prison. He was the one who worked with Hamas on the prisoners' letter, which was the essence of the Cairo agreement of the reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas. Right. So Marwan carries a lot of legitimacy in everybody's eyes as a decent person, right? Despite the fact that he's a bit of a Arafat in his politics, right? But he has currency with Hamas and with a lot of people in being somebody at least who has much more credibility than Abu Mazen because he actually reaches across the aisle, if you want. And that is something that is, again, I think we do have some opportunity if he gets elected or if he's on the ballot. I do see a scenario where it's good to have our president in prison because that kind of like you actually, Aziz, like the value of you running for the municipal elections in Jerusalem 2 years ago was precisely to bring attention to the plight of Palestinian Jerusalemites. Like the point was not you winning. The point was to make the issue this. Even if people said, "Oh, this is normalization," what have you. That is smart politics, right? That's how the theory of change works. You want to bring attention. Martin Luther King chose, like he didn't, oh, wallahi, just do things. He was very strategic. He wanted the cameras to be there and he broke the law. That's the whole point, because he wants to bring attention that the law is unfair. So these are the kinds of opportunities we need to be looking for.
Let me ask this.
Before you ask it, we just have another question from the audience and or a couple, and we need to start finishing up soon. We have one question about the vaccines. If the elections can be used as a way to get the vaccines earlier to Palestine, similar to, well, that's the question here, but similar to what Netanyahu did with the Israeli elections.
I don't think so.
You don't.
I don't see that. We're already getting some vaccines. I think there is like 6,000 of them already shipped to the PA, and they're saying they will get more from Russia.
6,000.
6,000.
Well, I think
small number.
Soon Palestine will become Israel's problem, at least in terms of the vaccine. It's something that Israel has been throwing away a lot of vaccines, and I think that we're also understanding the amount of people that are coming in from Palestine daily. And then I'm thinking even soon about tourists that will want to drive in between Israel and Palestine. I'm more hopeful for that, for Israel waking up and saying, okay, maybe we can also help here.
Don't we need a Kubat Halim? I mean, the reason why Israel's successful is because they have their medical. Yeah, I mean, we don't have that.
Right. And unfortunately, it's not only going to be a question of vaccines, it's going to be also a question of operations, how it's going to have infrastructure.
There's no logistics, yeah.
But even with the infrastructure and logistics, they just threw, I think, a couple of days ago, 1,000. Which is a huge amount.
They don't have the refrigerators for the Pfizer vaccine. Those refrigerators don't exist in.
No, in Israel they throw it. There were not enough people to go and take it.
Ah, right.
Yeah, they just opened it up for the whole population
for
now.
Day.
So
yeah.
No, not for the day. From here forward, 16 and up can come get vaccinated.
Yeah.
Anyway, final question we had from Facebook actually is if people do want to stay informed about this issue, we talked about having it a difficult experience finding information in different media sources. Is there something we can follow? Something people can read or look to?
About the Palestinian elections or Palestinian issues in general?
Yeah.
I think
Palestinian, yeah, probably both.
there aren't, I mean, to be honest, there aren't
much
many great ways
coverage.
to get really, like you can go to some Palestinian media outlets. Unfortunately, most of them are party line. Like if I think of Ma'an, you'll never find a criticism of Abbas in Ma'an, not in a million years. If you want to hear about Israel-Palestinian stuff, they might be a good source to get the Palestinian views, but not internal. For internal Palestinian issues in English, it's really hard. I think the best way is to follow people. Like you can follow Nizar, you can follow Kefah, you can follow Husam. I think follow
Nizar
the
Bannat, I
people.
really like them.
Nizar
Nizar
Bannat.
Bannat.
And
He-
Isa Amr. And Isa Amr
Isa
also.
Amr.
He's
Isa
been
Amr
doing
is
good
very
work.
good.
Yeah.
On
You can
what
also-
platform? On
Also
what
watch
platforms?
Facebook.
all of them. Watch Palestinians and Israelis fighting online. That's probably the best way to follow and see what's up here. So, because I think that's what social media brought, is that we're actually like, we're talking, maybe not so well, but like we're engaging and telling each other what's going on.
What's Ahed's cousin's name? Ahed Tamimi, her
J-
cousin. She's very active on Facebook.
Jana?
Jana, yeah.
Jana.
Yeah.
Jana.
And others. There's
Mhm.
a lot of on Facebook. That's good.
Yeah, you can find some on Twitter, some on Facebook. I think from the US, you have people like, again, like Noura Ariqat, I think is really
Yes.
a good person
Yeah.
to follow. Khalid Al-Jindi is a good person to follow on negotiation issues. And
But on
everything.
Palestinian, internal Palestinian affairs, Hani Al-Masri is good.
Ramzi Baroudi. I
Ramzi
like it.
Baroudi,
Yeah.
Ramzi Khouri.
Yeah, that's if you follow a few of these,
few
it will
people, yeah.
suggest you others. I think that's the best way. Honestly, media outlets, you're not gonna get.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
don't
just-
have any, and I'll even say beyond. I mean, last year there've been a few Palestinian journalists arrested in the Palestinian prisons because of their views on internal political issues. So you're not gonna find a lot of media's willing, Al-Quds, even in Arabic. It's hard to find media that would publish critical pieces. Like this kind of conversation isn't as common in media outlets, let's say. And hopefully,
Al Jazeera Plus sometimes does.
yeah, true. Al Jazeera.
Aziz, while we're closing up, can someone type up some of these names on the chat for our listeners? I'm sure that they'll have difficulties just spelling everything. Well, and just before we close, I want to say thank you to all of our guests. I mean, I think this was an amazing discussion and interesting, and definitely, I mean, to continue what we just talked about, I'm happy to give our listeners the opportunity to learn more. And as we said, next week we'll be discussing the Israeli elections. I think that the question in my mind is if both of these at the same time can bring any type of change in terms of the conflict. Going back to cynicism, I'm not very hopeful, but maybe.
Well, maybe next month, guys, we can invite you back in a month or so and get an update about what's happening. And I don't think we were able to get to every question. It's just we literally didn't ask any of the questions Kim and I prepared because there were so many questions from people, which is always great. So
send them. I'm happy to reply by email.
Right. So we can. I think what we can do is next month, if you agree. I think this is a nicer group to continue this conversation. I enjoyed having this conversation, and I need people to bounce these ideas with. So if you're up for it,
How about, I'm going to suggest something. Next time we talk about you running again here in Jerusalem and drumming up more support. Yeah. And let's just go total Dr. King, Southern United States on this.
If you agree to be my campaign manager, I'll do it. I need some serious support. And if it's somebody like you who's willing to do it with me, then yeah, I'm in.
All joking aside, Aziz, it takes organizing, and there are amazing organizers. Oh, what's his name, ya Jama'a? Ya Allah, young, round face, works at Avaz. from البيرة.
Sam Bahor.
Sam Bahor, yeah, is great.
Sam
Sam
Bahor.
Bahor, yeah, Sam is great.
Not
Yeah,
Sam Bahor.
following Sam Bahor.
Young guy. He's an activist, non-violent activist. Ya Allah. He's great because he has excellent analysis, and what I like about him is that he understands.
Qassam Mejdi.
لا.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Well, we'll
I will share it next time.
yeah,
Okay.
we'll prepare a list next time, written list, so everyone can join and have that list, and you can follow if you want, Twitter, Facebook, or Clubhouse, or whichever social media you're on.
Thank you again.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thanks for everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye.